Hi, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. We are continuing in the Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. In our last video, we were in 1989 with our heroine, there we go, heroine, Ariel. And she was attending her brother's funeral, who had died in a war situation. And she's lunching with her father and stepmother, who is just being awoken from a nap. And that is where we stopped. All right. I don't see how we can speak, said Grace, blotting her eyes, which were swollen with tears, and brushing a wisp of stark blonde hair from her forehead with the back of her wrist. I don't see how we can eat. It's terribly incredible to imagine how we can all be sitting here in a restaurant trying to behave like human beings. Until that moment, it had never occurred to me that someone like Grace had ever visualized the concept of attempting to behave like a human being. Things were starting to look up. I glanced around at the walls of the restaurant, which were done up with lattices covered in painted vines. They were scattered with a few tiny red-painted lizards, which seemed to be basking in invisible sunlight. The table groupings were separated by large plantings of fresh chrysanthemums, flowers that are offered in tribute to the dead in all Italian cemeteries. I'd begun and ended the day in a cemetery. Only that afternoon, I'd looked up the word in a bookstore from the Greek kometerion, a sleeping chamber, koiman, to put to sleep, or Latin, kune, a cradle. It was nice to think of Sam, wherever he was, as cradled in sleep. He was so young, Grace was saying between little sobs as she took another bite of steak tartare. She adjusted her diamond bracelet, adding the telltale words, wasn't he? The truth of the matter was, Grace had never met Sam in her life. My mother's divorce from Augustus had been nearly 25 years ago, and he and Grace had been married for little more than 15. In between, with lots of proverbial water beneath the bridge, including how Sam got to be my brother without actually being the son of my mother or father, my family relations are rather complex. But I had no time to think of that, for Grace had moved on to her favorite topic, money. As she switched to it, her tears miraculously dried and her eyes took on a luminous glow. We phoned the lawyers this afternoon from the suite, she told me, suddenly filled with buoyant enthusiasm. The reading of the will, as you know, is tomorrow, and I think I should tell you that we got some good news. Though they won't give out the details, of course, it does appear that you are the principal heir. Oh, goody, I said. Sam hasn't been dead a week, and already I've profited. Did you dig out exactly how rich I'll be? Can I retire from my labors right now? Or are the tax folks likely to take most of it? That's not what Grace meant, and you know it, said Augustus, who was designing forms in his creme de voila as I jabbed at the capers on my Scottish salmon. Yum. They rolled around the plate and evaded my fork. Grace and I are only concerned for your own interest, he went on. I didn't know Sam, at least not well, but I'm sure he cared a great deal for you. After all, you practically grew up as brother and sister, didn't you? As Ernest's only heir himself, Sam must have been very, well, comfortable financially. My late Uncle Ernest, who'd been in the mining and mineral business, was my father's older brother. and rich as Midas. On top of that, he died with every cent he made because spending was of no interest to him. Sam was his only child. When my parents, Augustus and Jersey, divorced, I was still very tiny. My mother ran around with me for a number of years, visiting all the capitals of the world. She was welcome in such places since she'd been a famous singer long before marrying my father, which is how she met the peanut farmer and nearly everyone else of high social visibility. Their last name, B-E-H-N, the Ben men had always liked flamboyant women. But like my father, they often had trouble actually living with them. Jersey had been drinking for years, but everyone expected opera singers to be swilling champagne as if it were water. It wasn't until August announced his betrothal to Grace, a clone of Jersey at a similar age, but 20 years her junior, that the bottle came out of Jersey's closet. She fled with me to Idaho to consult my widowed, hermit-like Uncle Ernest about financial matters. My father had invested all her earlier musical income in himself, another Ben male trait. And to everyone's surprise, Jersey and Ernest fell in love. And I, a child who'd grown up like Eloise at the plaza, eating pâté de foie gras before I could pronounce it, me either, suddenly found myself in the middle of nowhere that I now, nearly 20 years later, called home. So my father's question, seemingly vague, was really direct and to the point. My mother, married to 2 consecutive brothers, had actually stopped drinking during Ernest's lifetime. Knowing her as he did, though, Ernest left all his money to Sam, with a proviso to take care of her and of me as he deems best. And now Sam himself was dead. In all likelihood, his death made me a multimillionaire. Uncle Ernest died 7 years ago when I was off to college, and none of us had seen Sam since. He simply vanished. Jersey and I got our checks every month. She drank hers, and I put mine into an account and left it there. Meanwhile, I did something radical, something the Ben family woman had never done. I got a job. It was when I started working as a nuclear security officer, my first week on the job, that I heard from Sam. He phoned my office, though God knows how he knew where I was. "Hi, hotshot," Sam said, his favorite name for me ever since we were children. "You've broken a family tradition. No high notes or high kicks in a chorus line. Life upon the wicked stage ain't whatever a girl supposes." I quoted from my vast, unsolicited musical repertoire. But I was ever so happy to hear his voice. "Where have you been all these years, blood brother? You don't need gainful employment, I gather, now that you're a full-time family benefactor. Thanks for all the checks." "In fact," Sam corrected me, "I'm gainfully employed by a variety of governments that shall remain unnamed. I provide a service no one else can, with the possible exception of those who've been hand-trained by me, a group of 1. Maybe one day you'll consider going into a joint venture." And the cryptic hint of a job offer was the last I'd heard of Sam until my phone call from the executor. I felt the tires start to suck under the snow. The whole car was sliding, pulling with a riptide force off the road. Adrenaline gushed as I snapped to and gripped the steering wheel, throwing my whole weight behind it. I yanked those massive tons of steel back from the edge of the shoulder, but now it was hurtling in the opposite direction, out of control. Bloody hell, I couldn't run off the road. There was nothing out there but snow and more snow. It was so black, the snowfall so thick, I couldn't even see what was beyond the road on either side, maybe a sheer drop. I heard my mind as if inside a well screaming, "Fool, fool," while I racked my brain trying to recall when I'd passed the last light in the abyss out there. 50 miles back? 100? As these panicky thoughts ran through my mind, I was still able, with that dual processing ability we come equipped with, to marshal my muscles and juices to bring the car back under control. I rocked it back and forth like a yo-yo, trying to prevent it from spinning out, trying to feel beneath me as I would under a pair of skis, the tires hydroplane on the new snow that had now formed a slick, waxy surface atop the lethal layer of diamond-hard black ice. It seemed forever until I felt I was winning the wrestling match, and the rhythm of the thousands of pounds of steel started to move towards a center of balance. I was shaking like a leaf as I let it slow to 30, 25. I took a deep breath and nudged it back up, knowing, like every mountain girl, that you never stop completely when the snow's coming down like that, or you may never get momentum again. As I moved on into the black, empty night, casting prayers of gratitude, I slapped my face a few times, hard, and rolled down the car window to let the blizzard come in and swirl around inside. Needles of snow cut my skin. I took a deep breath of icy air and held it into my lungs for a minute. I wiped my stinging eyes with the back of my glove, then yanked off the ski cap I'd been wearing and shook my hair around wildly in the whirling wind that was battering around inside the car, blowing bits of paper in its wake. By the time I rolled the window back up, I had returned to reality, greatly sobered. What the hell was wrong with me? Of course, I knew what was wrong. Sam was dead, and I was having trouble visualizing life on this planet without him. It was what a schizophrenic might call being beside yourself with grief. Though I hadn't seen or heard much from Sam these past 7 years, he was always there in everything I did. In a way, he was the only real close family I'd ever had. For the first time, I realized that his absence, I had conversations with him in my mind. Now I had no one to talk to, even in my head. Still, I wasn't about to join Sam in the happy hunting grounds this moment, certainly not by flunking an intelligence test out here on the midnight road. It was then that I noticed a glow in the distance that I could just make out through the thick, lacy curtain of snow. It was large enough to be a town, and there weren't that many out here in the high desert. It looked like home to me. But the adventure was not quite over. I pulled up on the road above the house that contained the charming root cellar I called home, and I looked down in exhausted frustration. The driveway had disappeared, vanished in the whipped cream snow that was drifted above the first floor windows. It seemed that after miles of grueling combat driving, I now had to face a dig-in to reach the house at all, much less to uncover my fathoms deep basement apartment. That's what I deserve for living in a cellar in Idaho, just like a GD potato. I turned off the ignition and sat looking in gloomy silence down the steep hill where the drive used to be and trying to figure out what to do. Like all mountain folk, in the back of my car, I had carried emergency supplies in all seasons. Sand, salt, water, thermal clothes, waterproof foot gear, fire-making supplies, jump starters, ropes, and chains. But I had no shovel. Even if I had, I'd be incapable of moving enough snow myself to get my car down that drive. I sat there, mindlessly numb, watching the soft, sifting shroud of falling snow dropping silently around me. Sam would say something funny just now, I thought, or maybe jump out and start dancing in the snow, a snow dance, as if he were taking credit for the handiwork of the gods. And we're going to stop right there. Don't want the videos to be too long. All right, you guys. Well, that's interesting. And it was a pretty accurate, I mean, I don't know if you've ever driven in snow or on black ice, but it was a pretty accurate description. All right. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.